Hey there, everyone, and welcome to the Authentic Health Podcast. For those of you listening on the Jason Wright Show on Authentic Health Fridays, thank you so much for joining. So today I want to talk about something that is of utmost importance, and it continues to be a topic that is talked about by every leading expert on health, wellness, Healthspan, and longevity that there is out there, and that is body composition. If you are like me, when you hear the term body composition, immediately you think in very simplistic binary terms like fat or skinny, in shape or out of shape. And that is being very short-sighted. There is much more to body composition than just what meets the eye. In fact, there are times when someone may look to be rather healthy. However, due to their body composition, they really are not. And the primary components of body composition that we have to focus on are two. One is fat. The next is lean body mass. As it relates to fat, there are two types of fat that we need to understand how to measure and how to manage. And we need to understand what the ramifications of not paying attention to these types of fat can be on our body. Now, before I get started on what I really want to talk about today, which is this article that Peter Attia just put out about body composition and its importance and how it relates to overall health and wellness, I want to tell you, you can actually go over to the Jason Wright Show, Authentic Health Friday, and Dr. Gus Vickery, my co-founder and partner in Authentic Health Partners, he has actually done multiple episodes with me on body composition. This is one of Dr. Gus's wheelhouse issues. Whenever Ozempic, semaglutide, which is the most popular name for semaglutide, which is the peptide that everybody was taking that was predominantly used for diabetes, then started being really popularized for weight loss. Now there's a whole lot of things surrounding semaglutide. But whenever this became very popular, I asked Gus to come on the show and talk about these peptides and whether they were safe, whether they weren't, and if you're going to use them, how to safely apply them. And so a lot of what we talk about in that episode is about body composition. So I'm actually going to link to that episode in the show notes. And then also, Dr. Gus and I developed a body composition handbook, which I'm also going to link to. It is free of charge. It's an ebook form, so you can download a PDF and have it with you everywhere you go. And it is the exact protocols that Dr. Gus uses in his clinic for helping people who need to change their body composition. All right, so if I'm going to say that body composition just isn't about being fat or skinny, healthy or non-healthy, in shape or out of shape, then what does it mean? Well, I want to get into this article that Peter Attia wrote. Let me get over here to it. If you're watching on the screen, I'm going to pull it up. Where he actually takes on this idea, if you want to look it up, and by the way, I highly recommend subscribing to Peter Attia's newsletter and articles. I don't know if this one is behind the paywall or not. I am a subscriber to Peter Attia's behind the paywall content through his Drive members only podcast. The Drive podcast is his personal podcast that is fantastic. I can tell you the biggest utility value that I get from being a subscriber is the show notes. The show notes that he has on the subscriber only podcast site are very, very in-depth. It goes into a lot more detail on the research that he used to arrive at different conclusions and data that he's presenting. It's just a fantastic place to go get knowledge on these topics of longevity and health and wellness. So you hear me mention Peter Attia a lot if you listen to my podcast, which hopefully a lot of you have come over from the Jason Wright Show to the Authentic Health Podcast, and you hear me talk about it a lot. I think between Gus Vickery, my partner, who is my business partner, who is a precision health MD, and Peter Attia, those are kind of my two gurus in this space. So anyway, Peter Attia wrote this article, and it says it's called Body Composition, Impact on Disease Risk and How to Assess and Improve It, a refresher on why you should care about body composition, a practical guide to determining and interpreting your measurements. Now, I want to read this first paragraph to you because I think it's very telling of the limitations that we currently have as it relates to assessing our body composition. I can almost guarantee you that everyone listening to this has heard of BMI, your body mass index. Any of you that have gone out for a life insurance policy, you probably had your BMI taken. Whenever you go to the doctor, if you just go for a wellness visit, they're going to tell you what your BMI is. As I started getting in really good shape and increasing my lean body mass versus my fat mass, I'll be honest with you, I got a little frustrated because my BMI would be rather high because BMI does not separate your fat from your lean body mass. It just essentially is a measurement that has to do with your weight, your height, and that's about it. And so I want to start out there just giving an understanding of some of the limitations that are kind of in common nomenclature of assessing our body composition and why I don't think it's a good measure. So here's how the article starts out. Countless different metrics are used to assess metabolic health. Body mass index, BMI, the mass of the body divided by height squared, is among the simplest and most commonly used. But while BMI may provide a fair indication of overall trends in metabolic health across a given population, it falls short for assessing the metabolic health of any given individual. I often joke that at the individual level, it tells me little more about one of my patients' health than their eye color. So essentially, Peter Attia is saying that when it comes to your BMI, as whenever he's treating one of his patients, it means nothing. It's pretty much an irrelevant measure of their overall metabolic health as it relates to their body composition. Let's see here. The reason for this failure is that BMI does not take into account how mass is distributed between fat mass and lean mass, which have largely opposing effects on metabolic health. In other words, BMI provides no information about body composition, a set of variables with far more relevance to health and mortality than body weight or BMI alone. So here's what I want to talk about today, and here's what we're going to get into. I'm going to take information from this article and read it along with the commentary. So when we talk about body composition, we're literally talking about how much of your body is composed of lean body mass and fat. And then as I'm about to read about fat mass, you need to figure out how much of your body is composed of subcutaneous fat and non-subcutaneous fat. So the non-subcutaneous fat is also what you've probably heard as VAT, V-A-T, which is visceral fat, which is the fat that's around your organs, your heart, your soft organs, so like your intestines. This is the fat that you and we don't see. And incidentally, here's a weird example. So Butterbean, the professional boxer, I don't know if any of you all ever remember watching him. I think he may have fought Tyson. I'm not sure back in the day, but he was this really fat guy that was huge. However, he had healthy fat. Most of his fat was healthy subcutaneous fat. He did not have a lot of visceral fat. So even though he was really large with regard to fat, he was a pretty healthy guy. Kind of a weird case scenario. But what it shows is that due to things like genetics and other biomarkers, you may look like you're fat and unhealthy, which to maintain good metabolic health, you're pretty safe to look at someone that's thin and lean and go, yeah, they're probably healthy. But what we miss is understanding the visceral fat. So that's one of the things I really want you to kind of think about as you go through this, that it's not as simple as just losing weight. So if you are unhealthy and you're struggling with your health metabolically, let's say you're getting sick, you have achy bones, whenever you do get the flu or you get a cold or something, it lingers and lasts forever, you're having a hard time recovering from it. And you think, well, it's because I'm overweight. I'm just not eating the right things. I just need to lose some weight. Well, it's not that simple when it comes to body composition. And that's one of the main reasons why I wanted to bring this on the show today. So let's get into it. So let's talk about the fat mass. Okay, just a quick recap. Sorry to be redundant, but our body composition is essentially what we're talking about is what our body is composed of as it relates to lean body mass versus fat mass. So let's talk about fat mass. And now I'm going to read back from the article. Adipose tissue, commonly referred to as fat mass, is linked to higher risk of all-cause mortality, ACM. When present in large amounts throughout the body, for instance, I always mispronounce this, Mendelian randomization, MR studies, which leverage genetic variants assumed to be randomly distributed throughout the population to mimic a randomized controlled trial using observational data, have shown that high genetically predicted fat mass is associated with a higher risk of ACM. So essentially, the more fat, the more body fat, the more your body is composed of fat versus lean body mass, the more likely you are to die of anything. All-cause mortality. Colds, falls, doesn't matter. You're more likely to die if you have more fat. It's that simple. However, not all fat mass is created equal. Fat exists in two main forms based on its location within the body: subcutaneous adipose tissue and non-subcutaneous adipose tissue. Subcutaneous fat consists of the fat that is found underneath the skin, most commonly around the hips, thighs, belly, and butt, and it represents the normal form of fat storage. Non-subcutaneous fat can be found around the viscera or soft internal organs, where it is referred to as visceral fat or VAT, and incorporated into the pancreas, liver, and within muscle. Non-subcutaneous fat typically accumulates as the body's capacity for subcutaneous fat storage reaches its limit. And it is this form of fat that creates the most problems with respect to metabolic health. Now, one of the things, I won't read this whole thing to you, but the way that Peter Attia describes this, so this is what makes visceral fat tough to manage. You and I, as it relates to how much fat we have to store in our subcutaneous fat, right? The fat that's stored in the normal places, the fat that is in our butt, thighs, and places where we should be storing fat. All of us have what he refers to as like a different size bathtub. So some of us have the capacity to hold a great deal of subcutaneous fat. Think back to Butterbean, I guess. That's probably what his deal was. He had a huge capacity for storing subcutaneous fat. But we have no idea how big our bathtub is. So our personal bathtub that holds our fat, right, our subcutaneous fat, it may start to overflow quicker than some other persons. That's why you can't just have two people side by side and have this direct, precise formula for how much fat one can have versus how much fat the other. Someone that may look healthy and not all that fat and overweight might in fact have a great deal of non-subcutaneous visceral fat, simply because their fat bathtub, that's Peter Attia's analogy, which I think works very well, than the other guy. Okay, so what we have to figure out is, since we really have no way of managing how much subcutaneous fat we can actually hold without it becoming a danger by overflowing and becoming visceral fat, again, the fat that goes around our soft organs and causes really big problems like inflammation and all these other things, then how do we manage that? Well, step one, high level, I would say, is to just reduce your overall fat in general. Okay? Just decide whatever size my bathtub is, I'm going to try not to fill it up to where it's overflowing. I think, and I think the simple eye test is a good measure for this, right? Okay. So let's get down here and talk about lean mass, because lean mass is where we can really start to move the needle on making sure that regardless of how big our own personal little bathtub is and how much fat overflows from our subcutaneous to our non-subcutaneous, i.e. visceral fat, is the best way to target overall metabolic health and body composition is to focus on our lean body mass. Okay, so here we go. We've talked about fat. That's one input as it relates to our body composition. Now let's talk about lean mass. Lean mass includes skeletal muscle, which is the tissue we typically focus on, and makes up the majority of lean mass. One study estimated that on average, that 38.4% of men's total body mass and 30.6% of women's total body mass is made up of skeletal muscle. So a huge portion of our body is made up of skeletal muscle, which is why, and just be thinking about that, if that is such a huge portion of your body's lean mass makeup, then it's obviously pretty important that we maintain it and we make sure that it stays healthy. And we're going to talk a little bit about how we can do that very thing. Continuing. Take two examples of 50-year-old individuals in the 50th percentile or lower by fat mass for their sex. For a male with 15% fat mass, that would mean 45.2% of his lean mass is muscle. While for a female with 25% fat mass, that would mean 40.8% of her lean mass is muscle. However, lean mass also includes the mass of other non-fat and non-bone body parts, including internal organs and skin. Increased muscle mass and the strength that generally accompanies it prevents frailty as we age, which both improves quality of life and decreases fall risk in old age. Because falls and associated fractures dramatically increase mortality risk with increasing age, fall prevention is key to successful aging. In addition, muscle mass has positive effects on glucose tolerance because muscle cells help shunt glucose from the bloodstream, improving whole body metabolism. I want to stop right here. Have you ever wondered why people, as they get older, all of a sudden they start to develop diabetes? Just because they're older. Why does this happen? Well, part of the reason why is because the older we get, the more our natural lean body mass starts to deteriorate. And whenever we don't have that lean body mass to help shunt and offset the glucose in our system, and whenever we become less insulin sensitive as we get older, that's why you see a lot of older people start to have to supplement by taking extra, either metformin or something. I guess they would take metformin. I'm not a doctor, not playing one on this podcast, and so please, don't think that for a minute. But the bottom line is, I guarantee you, a lot of your grandparents or people that you know that are older, they start to develop insulin resistance as they get older. This is one of the ways you can help to stave that off, is by maintaining lean body mass. It will help with your insulin sensitivity. Another thing that is incredibly important that Peter Attia mentions here, which he's mentioned in many other forums as well, is this idea that we need to make our bodies fall proof. How many times do you hear of someone who's older falling and breaking a hip? Well, here's the research that you may not have paid attention to, and why would you? Is that if you are over, I believe, the age of like 65, and you're in the bottom quartile for lean body mass, and maybe lean body mass and VO2 max, or just lean body mass, I can't remember what it is. It's just basically, if you are old and you are not in good shape, you have a 40% chance of dying, of never recovering from a break, from a fall or anything. And so when you hear of all these older people that they fall, because as we get older, we're not as well balanced. Our type 2 twitch muscles, our fast twitch muscles, we haven't used them in years, so we're not as reactive to help quickly defend ourselves against a fall. So it's kind of like a tree just falling versus, like a cat whenever it goes to fall and it finds its feet. We lose that ability as we get older. And then whenever we do hit the pavement, we do hit the ground, we don't have that lean body mass, that strength, and that bone density to protect us. So if you are someone listening to this, and I'm 49, I turn 50 next year, so I consider myself old. Because around the age of 40, that's when we really start to fall off of our natural ability to build muscle and lean body mass. If you are 50 or over, or if even 40 or over, I highly encourage you to start developing lean body mass. Do not think because you're 70 years old, you do not need to be lifting weights, because you absolutely, positively do. You need to lift weights. You need to lift heavy objects. Grip strength, as I'll probably read here, it's in this article, grip strength is one of the strongest indicators of longevity. So let's continue down here a little bit. Changes in body composition with age. This is something that we need to remember. While fat mass has the ability to become a potent mediator of inflammation, atherosclerosis, and insulin resistance, lean mass, muscle, at least in the form of skeletal muscle, works in much the opposite way. It's like the kryptonite to all the bad stuff, That's why it's so important. Remember that. Having muscle is like having kryptonite against things like insulin resistance, I cannot overstate, and this is something that's new to me. I did not want to be bulky and muscular in my old age. I just want to be lean. I want to look like Brad Pitt from Fight Club. That's kind of my muse, just thin, lean, wiry. That's what I want to look like. I'm never going to look like that because I'm not genetically predisposed to look like that. So I'm going to have to be a little bulkier than I want. And so if I'm getting bulkier, at least I know I'm staying healthier, because I want to build up that kryptonite against things like insulin resistance and frailty in old age. At least in the form of skeletal muscle, works in much the opposite way. It improves the body's ability to handle blood glucose, which essentially means helps you maintain insulin sensitivity, which in turn positively impacts multiple aspects of health, not to mention the additional benefits of preventing frailty and bone deterioration. Thus, though two people may be equivalent in BMI, going back to this whole BMI thing, differences in body composition may mean that they differ radically in their underlying health. Likewise, having the same BMI at 60 as you had at the age of 30 cannot be interpreted as evidence of equivalent metabolic health between the two ages. Body composition changes naturally with age, which is why it is so critical to monitor these metrics over time. From birth to our early to mid-20s, we rapidly gain muscle mass. But after about 40, muscle mass begins to decline, a process which accelerates with further advances in age. Fat-free mass, FFM. Building up a reserve of muscle early and maintaining into older age can help buffer some of the negative effects of this age-related muscle decline. Fat muscle also has a distinct pattern of change throughout life, but tends to increase throughout life. So among the oldest ages likely reflect the loss, the small decline apparent among the oldest ages likely reflect the loss of fat that accompanies advanced disease such as dementia or cancer. That's referring to some these graphics that are on the screen. So forgive me for that. So then what Peter Attia does is he goes into some explanations on how you can actually determine your body composition. I won't give you all those ways. The two primary ones that he talks about and it kind of recommends as it relates to cost to perform as well as accuracy. Number one is a DEXA scan. And you can read this article. I'll link to this. I think, again, you may have to sign up to read the whole thing. I'm not going to illegally do a PDF or anything for you. Sorry, I'm just not going to do that. But you can link to this, and you can see that a DEXA scan is probably going to be your most cost-effective as well as accurate way to get your body's fat versus lean body mass. Also, one of the things that's pretty helpful is just these scales that we stand on. Now, they will vary. That, for example, what I've learned with mine is if I'm really hydrated, my body fat percentage will report probably 2 points lower because it can't tell the difference between water and lean body mass. And if I'm dehydrated, which really sucks, you've been working out and haven't had much, you feel lean, you can kind of see your veins, you go and your body fat looks like it's really high. Well, the reason why is because you're dehydrated. And so it's going to kind of skew the read. So if you are someone that uses like a Withings or one of the other, mine's a Brule or something. I can't remember the name of my scale. I use both of those actually in my bathroom. If you're using one of those electronic scales to determine your body fat and your weight, then the best way to get as accurate as possible is to do it at the same time every single day. And also don't do it after you've done something that's a little extreme, like you've had a lot to eat. You just finished Thanksgiving dinner and you decide to go check your body weight and your body fat. Don't do that. If you had a really hard workout or a long run or something like that, don't do it then. Just kind of do it like, I know Andrew Huberman usually gets on his scale right after he's performed his morning bodily functions. So I get up and I get on, what I'll do is I'll get up, I'll go pee, and I'll get on the scale. That's what I do, and I'll check it at that time. That's my normal time, and that's what I journal every day. And then usually I'll go back right after my morning cardio workout just to see if there's any variance, just to try to get an idea. So that's something you can do. But here's the thing that as you're looking at body composition, it's not overcomplicated, okay? There's a very simple metrics that you can apply that Peter Attia has developed. And this is what he does to assess all of his patients when they come in to work with him. Okay, there are 4 quadrants that determine kind of where you are with regard to body composition and how you're going to attack the levers to get yourself in the most healthy place possible with regard to body composition. So, when looking at muscle mass and versus fat, here are the 4 quadrants that Peter Attia has developed that he looks at. Overnourished, but under-muscled. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, that means exactly what it sounds like. If you are overnourished, that means you're fat, or you've got too much fat, and you're under-muscled. You don't have enough lean body mass. Okay, the next is you're overnourished, but adequately muscled. This means you're kind of like that guy in the gym that you see that all they do is bench press and some leg extensions, and they're kind of muscular. You can see that the fat kind of bubbles around their pecs and stuff like it should, but they're overnourished. They've got too much fat, but they've got also enough muscle. And then you've got the adequately nourished, but under-muscled. This is probably where I was at one point whenever I decided to go die hard cardio. And this is when, like you see, this is the person that has been taking semaglutide. That if you see your friends that have taken semaglutide or Ozempic, then I don't even know if this is a really good case because I don't know that I would say they're adequately nourished because they're probably not. Adequately nourished and under muscle, that really is somebody, I'm just skip the whole example of somebody that's been taking Ozempic. Instead, that's somebody like me probably 5 years ago whenever I first got my Peloton and I was doing a ridiculous amount of cardio. I think I was adequately nourished, but I definitely didn't have enough muscle. I was losing a lot of my muscle. So I was really thin. I got down to 186 for 6'2", and my frame, 186 is pretty light, but it wasn't good. So I was definitely under-muscled, but I think I was adequately nourished. And then the next quadrant is adequately nourished and adequately muscled. That's where I like to think I am right now. And I think that's kind of the sweet spot, is to have the nourishment you need. You're eating enough. And by the way, that means you're getting your macros right. You're getting enough protein. That'll help you. That protein synthesis will help you continue to increase muscle mass and that bone density that you need. And you're adequately muscled. You got enough muscle on your body. You're doing some resistance training. You're lifting heavy objects. So here is Peter Attia's kind of really high level top line plan of attack for whichever quadrant you might find yourself in. Let's say that you're under-muscled and you're over-nourished, okay? Again, under-muscled means you don't have a lot of muscle mass, but you're over-nourished. You've been eating too much. You're kind of just fat and soft, right? Here's what he would suggest. Restrict calories without compromising the amount of protein you're eating, which is important in promoting muscle growth. Focus exercises on lifting weights, resistance training to build muscle, but increase cardiovascular exercise as well. I want to say something about this because this is something that I learned from Dr. Gus, and you will see this in the Body Comp Protocol Handbook that you can get for free just by going to the show notes, download it. It's free, no charge, no strings attached. Whenever Dr. Gus is working with his patients in his clinic, one of the first things he's going to do is, if they're in this, under-muscled but overnourished, he's going to make sure, because he's going to have to reduce their caloric intake quite substantially, sometimes as low as 600 calories a day. Well, if you just do that in isolation, then you are going to starve your body of a lot of protein synthesis. And so you're going to lose muscle while you're losing the weight. That is not good. So what he recommends is making sure that you supplement with essential amino acids, sometimes as much as 3 times a day, morning, lunch, and dinner. That's exactly what I do on any given day because I want to make sure that I maintain a lower caloric intake because calorie restriction has been shown to have profound impacts on longevity and a lot of other good biomarkers. So I want to make sure that I'm never overfed as much as possible. Not that I don't overfeed quite a bit, but one of the ways to do that is to make sure you get essential amino acids. And you will soon be able to order, and here's a shameless plug, Authentic Health essential amino acids that were formulated specifically by Dr. Gus Vickery from over 30 years of clinical expertise in working with patients. So when Peter Attia is talking about this is one of the things, and it's what, like, going back to where this conversation first started. If you just look at it, if you're just simplistic about healthy versus non-healthy, fat versus skinny, a lot of people, whenever they go in, they only look at, and they look at themselves, they say, I'm too fat, I got to lose weight. And so they start walking and doing cardio and, taking spin classes, and that's all well and good. But you also need to make sure you have, for longevity, for long-term health, and for sustainable weight loss, you need to build muscle. Don't neglect yourself of that protein. Okay, I think I beat that horse well enough. All right, so next is the category 2, which means that you are adequately muscled and you're overnourished. You're the guy in the gym that looks like he's been stung, by a bee. You're kind of fat and flabby or whatever, right? Okay. So here's what you want to do. Restrict your total calories, particularly if high VAT is a concern. Okay, so if you think that you've got a lot of visceral fat, then you definitely need to restrict your total calories. If VAT is not high, choosing to restrict calories is primarily for aesthetic and or orthopedic injury purposes. If you choose to restrict calories for weight loss, it is okay to be at the lower end of protein intake. But don't compromise protein so much that it becomes difficult to build or maintain lean mass. Continue with weightlifting, resistance training, but increase cardiovascular exercise. So if you're somebody who you've got the muscle, but you've also got fat on top of that muscle, if you want to see the muscle, then just up your cardio, restrict your calories a little bit. Don't neglect your protein. That's 2 for 2 on protein, by the way. Don't neglect your protein, and you can kind of bring things into balance. And I guarantee you, just from listening to Peter Attia as much as I have, knowing what Dr. Gus Vickery would tell you, knowing what Dr. Michael Eads would tell you, knowing what Lane Norton would tell you is, hey, if you're starting, especially if you're over 40, and you're starting with good muscle mass, you're just overnourished, you're just a little chubby, I like that better than seeing you no muscle and overweight. If you've at least got the muscle, that's a great start, okay? So next is category 3, under-muscled and adequately nourished. Focus primarily on increasing protein intake. Again, 3 for 3, protein. Are you getting ding, 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 ding? You and I need our protein intake. If you happen to be undernourished, increase overall calorie intake in addition to protein intake. If you're adequately nourished, increase protein while keeping total calorie intake roughly constant. How do I do that? How can I eat the same amount of calories and raise protein at the same time? Jason, that doesn't make sense. Well, I'm glad you asked. The way you do that is through essential amino acids. This is money. It's magic. Listen to me. I didn't know this till recently when Dr. Gus alerted me to it. And this is why so many of his patients are taking essential amino acids. You can actually get the same protein benefits from essential amino acids, either in the powder form or capsules, whichever you choose, and you don't have the caloric intake. So you can literally add the equivalent of 15 to 20 grams of protein to your breakfast, lunch, and dinner with 0 calories by taking essential amino acids. That's why they are so important to whatever process you're in. So if you're trying to, if all things are equal, if you're looking, and by the way, if you're one of these people that you're like me and we weigh around 200 pounds and you hear guys like Peter Attia and Dr. Gus and Rhonda Patrick and Ben Greenfield saying, you really need to get 1.8 to 2 kilograms of protein for every, or 2 grams of protein for every kilogram of weight that you are, then you can be like, how in the heck am I going to eat 150 to 200 milligrams, depending on where you are, or grams rather, of protein? How in the world am I going to be able to do that? Well, one of the ways you can do that without having to stuff your face full of protein shakes and chicken breasts and all these things that eventually, when you start really zeroing in on your protein intake, it can be kind of daunting. It's one of those few times in nutrition where you say to yourself, there's no way I can eat all this. Well, essential amino acids are a great way to get that protein without having to stuff your face full of extra chicken breast. All right. Category 4, you're adequately muscled and you're adequately nourished. I would like to think this is where I am. Keep at it. Focus on going deeper into your exercise and nutrition goals and fine-tuning training and nutrition. And that's exactly where I am at this point. And that's where I hope for you to be. I don't say that arrogantly. What I mean by that is once you take care of these big top line issues, when you can just get sort of in balance, then it gets fun to really start to tweak, to really start to zero in on what your actual caloric protein, VO2 max training in the form of zone 5 versus zone 2, all these cool little things to really just kind of fine tune your body. It gets fun. And I can tell, and here's the thing I would tell you. One, it's not easy, but it's also not soul crushing. If you do something that I'm about to tell you right now, and I mean this with all my heart, is if you will actually get yourself to a place, let me get off the screen now because I want to talk to you full screen here, baby, if you're watching. It's not easy, but it doesn't have to be soul crushing if you'll do this one thing. Be patient. Be patient. Look, if you go into doing any of these things, whichever quadrant you find yourself in and attacking your body composition to try to get to this balance of adequately nourished, adequately muscled, if you think you get there quickly, you're going to get frustrated. This is for the long haul. This is for the rest of your life. This is finding sustainability. Okay? So be patient. I can tell you that I am probably as healthy as I've ever been in my entire life, mentally, physically, spiritually. And one of the reasons why is because it's just a day-to-day proposition. I'm not on a diet. I don't have a body fat percentage goal that I'm trying to hit by a certain time. Jimlyn and I are about to go on a vacation. We're going to be on the beach, and I'm not using that as a deadline to alter anything. What I'm trying to do is just maintain consistency and start small. Start small. It may be that the only change you make is adding amino acids, essential amino acids to your diet. That's it. That's the only thing. Obviously related to where you are in trying to attack this. Maybe it's as simple as going to get a DEXA scan. Don't change a thing. Just go get the scan to see where you are. Maybe it's taking walks. Start small and then add, and don't start in business. When I owned my real estate companies, I used to tell my agents whenever they would come to me, and they would always ask about how they should spend their money. Should I do this? Should I subscribe to this marketing plan? Should I take this course? Should I do this? Should I do that? And I would always tell them the same thing. Don't do anything today that you're not willing to do for at least the next 6 months. So I tell you the same thing. When you're starting to take control of your health and you start to make these changes, don't start doing anything today that you won't at least give 6 months and hopefully a lifetime to. Like when it comes to lifting weights, don't go in and don't get in the weight room and say, I'm going to lift 3 days a week and I'm going to lift heavy and I'm going to go on YouTube and find some videos. I'm just going to go crush myself for, 3 days a week for the next 4 months or 2 months. If you don't think you'll spend the rest of your life doing that, then don't do it. But if you are someone that you just go to Academy and you pick up 2 10-pound dumbbells, let's say you're 60 years old and you decide, you know what? I have no desire to go to a gym or go do CrossFit or any of this other crap. I'm not going to do all that I see these yahoos like Jason Wright doing. I'm not going to do that. Screw that. I got a life. But I'll go to Academy and pick up 2 10-pound dumbbells, and I'll do some curls and some overhead presses, and I'll lay down and do some floor presses. I'll start doing that every once in a while. Cool. Start there. Start small. And then maybe those 10-pound dumbbells become 15, 20, 30. Just get started, be consistent, and be patient with yourself. And then your body composition will change. So just to recap this really quickly, went way longer than I thought I would, especially for just a solo episode. Understand that your body composition is not as simple as fat or skinny, healthy, not healthy, muscular, non-muscular. It's not that simple. It's just not. There's much more to it. There's more than seen with the naked eye, because you've got this thing called VAT, your visceral fat. That fat around your organs, that's what you got to figure out. You got to figure out how big your personal bathtub is, right? You got to figure out how much of that subcutaneous fat you can hold before it starts to spill over into the non-subcutaneous and becomes visceral fat and starts causing problems. Lean body mass, you got to have it. If you're going to age in a healthy fashion, you got to have lean body mass. You've got to have skeletal muscle. You got to have it to protect you from falls. You got to keep your balance. You got to know that if you're 65 and we have a global pandemic and you get sick, that you have all the tools inside you to help you maintain good glucose management, to maintain strength, to bounce back quicker. Lean body mass. It is so absolutely critical to your body composition, your long-term health, and protein. 4 out of 4, with the exception of the person that's adequately nourished and adequately muscled. I think that's the only one that Peter Attia didn't mention protein. Peter Attia he used to be the chief medical officer for the app Zero. He was so known in all the health circles for his fasting protocols. Fasting was kind of Peter Attia's claim to fame. I think if there's anything that made Peter Attia a celebrity MD, it was probably fasting as much as anything. He's not so focused on fasting anymore. He'll tell you it's not that he doesn't do it and he doesn't see benefits in it at all, but what he is absolutely bullish on is protein consumption, as am I. I'm telling you, it is a game changer when you start to give your body the protein it needs to develop that muscle for longevity and overall good health. So check the show notes. I'm going to pack them full of good stuff for you. Download for free Dr. Gus's body composition protocol. That is literally what he gives his patients that come into him that are metabolically challenged and they're wanting to get on the path of taking control of their body composition. It is there. I will try to I'll at least link to the short form of this article. Again, I don't know if you're going to have to sign up to get the full thing. I don't remember if it's behind the paywall, but I want to give credit where credit's due to Peter Attia for this being his article that I drew so much of this information from. And stay tuned. Please keep coming back here. Please click like or subscribe if you're watching this on the YouTube channel. And if you are listening to this on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever, please subscribe. This is the official Authentic Health podcast where we are going to be bringing as much tools and education to you from physicians, my two business partners, Dr. Troy Jackson and Dr. Gus Vickery, as well as a whole host of experts in the field of health and wellness, precision medicine, biochemistry, you name it. They're going to be here on the Authentic Health podcast. This is I want this to be a free masterclass for you on health and wellness. Nothing less will do. So thank you so much for joining us. Here's to your authentic health.